Any guests to HBU besides my distinguished visitors? Are there any guests to HBU? All of you are veterans of HBU. Okay, well, welcome anyway. All right, welcome to the show. So thank you for coming. This event is being funded by you all with your generous donations to your student activity fees that you paid. Okay, so I want to acknowledge a student of mine that had the idea to have this event. Her name is Wesley Moberg, and she helped me write the grant to the committee that designates the funds. And just a few weeks ago, she had a major health crisis and had to return back to Norway, where she's from, to have a pretty serious surgical procedure, and she's out for the semester. So I just wanted to acknowledge her contribution to this. This wouldn't happen without her help. So this is also being held, we're getting moral support from, your financial support's coming from you all. The moral support's coming from the psychology department and from something called the Heroic Imagination Project. And I wanted to just say a few things about that. The Heroic Imagination Project is something started by Dr. Phil Zimbardo. And there's a website that you can go to, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. And let me first explain who Dr. Phil Zimbardo is. This is from his website here. How many of you already know Dr. Zimbardo? Okay, good, great. Psychology students. All right, let me say a few things about him. It turns out that it's his birthday today, so happy birthday to Iron Zim. Wait a minute, that's Iron Man. There he is. Iron Zim. So I want you all to do me a favor. He's going to see the recording of this. So I want you all to turn to the camera, wave to the camera with me, and say, "Happy birthday!" Happy birthday! So if you don't know who Dr. Zimbardo is, he's most famous for the Stanford Prison Experiment. And maybe that rings a bell if you get right away, you know who he is. This was a classic experiment done in 1971. It's now a major motion picture coming out later this year, so you psych nerds can watch for that, the Stanford Prison Experiment movie. Here's Dr. Z. He wrote about this experiment and about the concept of evil, which we're going to be exploring here tonight, in a book called The Lucifer Effect. It came out in 2007. And it does contain probably the most detailed description of that experiment, that classic experiment. So those of you that do want to know more about it, there's your source. And the major tenet of the book is trying to understand that evil is within anyone. The capacity for good as well as evil is within all of us. And so he's been trying to answer this otherwise baffling question, why good people do evil things. So we'll be, unfortunately, the theme here tonight. He has since turned his attention to good, and hence the Heroic Imagination Project. And this is something he started a few years ago in 2010, and there's the website for that. And I do hope you'll go and take a look at this. And the mission of this nonprofit organization is to teach individuals, starting with grade school children, high school students, college students, and everything beyond, to teach how to be heroes. The lesson that we've learned, painfully, is that we learn how to be evil, and therefore we can learn how to be good as well. Unfortunately, good comes out more often than evils, but still, it would be best if we would learn how to be heroic. So this program is about empowering people and teaching them the skills to release that inner hero. Hero in waiting, as Phil calls it. So we have these two bad boy experiments from 1961 and 1971. The Stanley Milgram experiment, blind obedience to authority. And then 10 years later, the prison experiment, also demonstrating this unusual behavior that can come out of bad situations. And again, I want to just point out that these, 1961, 1971, and we're here tonight to talk about a terrible event that happened more than a decade later, and almost a decade later, in 1978. Why didn't they know? Why didn't we know? 10, 20 years of knowing a lot more about this. Why didn't we know? And so most of you are psychology students, and reflect on that. We need to be better at getting the word out. We need to be better at teaching people about this capacity to engage in evil. It can come out if we're not on the lookout for it. So it's really sad that we knew all about this long before Jonestown happened. And that's the goal of the Heroic Imagination Project. So psychology has always been about helping. A lot of you have gone into psychology wanting to help. Okay, we have been, some of you have interest in helping children or adolescents or adults, elderly, working on issues of sexuality and gender, relationships, crisis and trauma, grieving and loss. Basically, a lot of people, when they think about psychology, they think of the therapy end of things. Okay? But we're, of course, also trying to help with education and careers, productivity of workers and the workplace and efficiency, health and wellness, not just mental illness and problems and crisis and trauma. And on a much larger scale, we have world issues that we need to tackle, okay? The crises that we face in this world are about behavior, and psychology has a lot to offer in helping us understand and change behaviors. We need to change behaviors in terms of sustainability. And we also look at happiness. Now, some of the irony is that we don't always know what makes us happy. We think we do, but psychology tells us that we don't always. And then for the nerds of us that maybe aren't in psychology for the therapy, counseling, clinical end of things, we're also trying to help with science, okay? So my background is not clinical counseling psychology, but I look at it from a scientific standpoint, okay? And tons of other things. So the Heroic Imagination Project is an attempt again to help us teach and learn how to be ready to be, a hero in waiting. So it's time to K-pop. The world needs heroes, the world needs you. So says So explore that website. Dr. Zimbardo has sent a greeting to us all, and in fact, you know what, I have copies of it, and I want you to read it because it's very inspiring. So let me pass around a copy of the letter that he sent us to give his greetings. He wishes he could be here, but he sent this to me yesterday, so take a copy if you would. Interested? Sure. He's a good friend of our department. He's been here in Hawaii a number of times. He's spoken at various locations, including here. So he did a talk story session here a number of years ago, and he's a good friend of ours. Okay. So I want to introduce your heroes for tonight. We have Laura Johnson Kohl and Vernon Gosney. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce them to you. So please give them a big aloha HPD round of applause to welcome. We're going to start things off. Laura's going to, I think, start? So Laura's going to start first, and then Vernon will speak, and we'll have ample opportunity either throughout or at the end, definitely, for questions. So I want you to be definitely thinking about what you'd like to ask. So we're very open to questions, and we're very happy to take your questions.
Okay, I do a lot of public speaking at universities and libraries, and one of the questions that comes up all the time is, who are you, why would you join People's Temple? And so one of the things I try to do is appear pretty normal. Like I could be somebody like your neighbor or your sister or your sister-in-law or some people like that. And so I put together this, you can start at the beginning. Yeah. Start at the beginning. Yeah. And so I put together just a quick slideshow of who I am and kind of attempting to pretend I'm normal. I'm actually far from normal. And normal, if normal means boring or normal means not creating friction where there's injustice, I'm not that. So I don't really want to be normal, but I think that you can fight for justice and still appear normal. It doesn't matter how you appear, it's what you do. It's not a matter of how you sound or what you say and if you mean it. So I really do believe that no matter what you look like, the truth of who you are is what you've done. So I'm going to go ahead and put on this.
Skipping
And I think I have to move out of the camera to do it, Rachel.
Yeah.
So this is what the temple building looked like in Redwood Valley. There was a pool in the back of the temple where people were baptized, and then otherwise people swam. And this is me right here. And I used to drive one of these Greyhound buses. So we had a fleet of 13 Greyhound type of buses that we went all over the country. And this is a group of people who lived in the commune with me at one point. This was the first trip to Guyana. And I was able to go down at Christmas before everyone came to look at it. That's the first crew. This is one of the classrooms in Jonestown. We had our own publisher who published all kinds of brochures about People's Temple. That was me. None of us ever smiled in pictures because revolutionaries were not supposed to smile. They're supposed to look very serious. That's what the cottages looked like in 1978. And we had triple bunk beds downstairs and then a loft up above. So that's another class. This is a bucket brigade. We plant all kinds of plants, and then we take turns watering it, kind of assembly line. And these are pictures. This is me when I was in Georgetown, and we would go around to all different places in Georgetown. That's what Jonestown looked like at the end. We had 52 cottages and 5 dormitories. I couldn't do a presentation about People's Temple without including Congressman Ryan. And the media, they were just doing their job, and they were killed. And so I want to give them, also credit them with being so serious about their jobs. This is what the anniversary services looked like in Oakland. Now we've divided into 2 groups. That was the more religious group, and now the rest of us, we gather around the cemetery on the 18th, but we don't necessarily have a service unless there's some, sometimes new people are buried around the cemetery, and we'll have words over them. The 2 other survivors with me. So we go to the California Historical Society. This is my son, and we would go there and identify pictures because people looked really different from when they left the United States, and so we had to identify who they were. The second cult I joined was Synanon, and so that was a picture of People's Temple and Synanon members at a speaking engagement I did. This is another California Historical Society meeting. I am an activist. I'm a Quaker, and I protest. I participate in gay pride parades and Martin Luther King parades and anti-war demonstrations, pro-immigration, all kinds of different things. The Veterans for Peace, so we're very involved. In May 2013, I started doing an oral history of survivors. I have 10 done, and I have 10 more I'm going to do this year. So in a way, what that is, it's just kind of an introduction, because people who join People's Temple could be anybody in this room or anybody you know. It's people who have strong convictions and they think that they could make a difference, and so that's why we joined groups. So that's a little bit about who I am. When I came back from Guyana, I joined another cult for 10 years, kind of got my life together. I went back and got my bachelor's degree in philosophy and psychology. And then I became a teacher, so I've been teaching 6th grade bilingual education in San Diego for the last 25 years. I just retired, and so I'm doing a bunch of different things. I'm also on the board of directors of the Communal Studies Association, So I work with other scholars who research what happens in communities, what happens with these kinds of societies, which ones get corrupted and which ones stay pure, which ones last. I always say if there's no transition team or no transition person who's going to take over for your current leader, you should watch out. There's no plan for it to continue after this leader. And so, because I was in People's Temple, I really felt that I wanted to make a difference, but I haven't found any one group that satisfies everything that I want to make a difference in. So I'd work with the ACLU on legal issues and Innocence Project, all kinds of immigration issues and things like that, because I know I can make a difference. And this time I'm not going to get waylaid by a con man who has the right answers or seems to have things going for him. I want to find my own way and find my place. So that's kind of who I am. We've talked a lot today about how we got into People's Temple, and we might move back and reflect on that for those of you who weren't there. If I maybe, Vern, you want to introduce yourself and what's going on with you, and then we'll see where we go.
Hi, my name is Vernon Gosney. Has anyone not heard of Jonestown or doesn't know anything about it? Okay, that's great to know. I'm a survivor of Jonestown. I am a longtime AIDS survivor. I'm a survivor of Hep C. I'm a survivor of my drug addiction and alcoholism. Been clean and sober for 26 years. And I'm here to kind of share with you. I came to the People's Temple in 1972, and I was living with my wife at the time. I met her in high school. She was African American from Harlem, and we had a lot of racial discrimination. Our families did not like us being together, and so the church that I grew up in would not marry us, even though it seems really weird now, but that's what happened. And it was a very exciting time. There was a lot going on. There was like the Civil Rights Movement. There was just a lot, and the Vietnam War. There was a lot going on there. But I joined the People's Temple because I had heard about Jim Jones, and we went there and we were embraced as an interracial couple. We were totally embraced, and Jones talked about socialism and communalism and living together and working together and creating a society with no racism, no homophobia, no ageism, no sexism. And that was really, really appealing because I was very dissatisfied with the world the way it was. And it was also a big family because we had no support system there. I mean, I had no support system outside of the temple, so it was, I don't know, it's like having 100 tutus or a couple hundred aunties everywhere. It was just a very beautiful mosaic of people. People were rich and they wanted to make a difference in the world. And that was the dream, and that's the dream we held on to, even when things went bad. As things inched towards the unacceptable, piece by piece, little by little, years after years, until November 18th, 1978. Congressman Ryan came on November 17th, and he came to investigate Jonestown, and he relied on the People's Temple for his transportation, for his everything. So he was relying on the people at the People's Temple for the people that he was investigating. So I slipped him a note on that night, and me and this other woman, helped us get out of Jonestown and to a newspaper reporter. So I talked to him that night and told him he was in a lot of danger, he needed to leave. He said, you were the first person to ask to leave, and you'll have the first 2 seats on the plane. And I tried to instill in him the danger he was in. They needed to leave right away. He said, well, we can't. We have to stay here. And so the next day, November 18th, myself, Monica, and other people had asked to leave. There were people who left on the railroad tracks and went on their own. And so there was about, how many did you say there was?
20 people left Jonestown, and everybody else died.
Yeah, 20 people.
Okay,
Yes.
20 people with Ryan.
Okay, yeah, 20 people with Ryan. So as things progressed, more people wanted to leave until someone tried to cut the congressman's throat, and he had to leave. So we left. We went to Port Kaituma. It was an airstrip, not an airport. It was just a cleared place in the jungle. And there was a plant, somebody who said they were a defector, but it was not. And we got to the airstrip, and the plane was just about to take off. And a truck of assassins, all people I knew, cut across the strip and started shooting open fire. Killed the congressman, Penny Parks, Don Harris, some other newspaper reporters were all killed. I looked out the window, I said, they're killing everyone, they're killing everyone. And I turned away in the small plane, I was in the small plane, and Larry Layton was sitting beside me, and he shot me 3 times. He shot my friend Monica in the back 2 times, and he tried to shoot Dale Parks in the face, but the gun didn't go off. So I escaped from the plane after fighting Larry and ran into the jungle and collapsed. As soon as I was in a place of safety, I collapsed. And so we stayed there until the next day. We didn't know that everyone had died. We didn't know that they were coming back any moment. Every breath I took was a struggle because my lungs had collapsed. I was shot in the liver, the spleen, and all that. So the next day, and all the other wounded people, Jackie Spears was wounded very badly, and Stephen Hasaris and other people. So the next day, the Guyana Defense Force came, and we were airlifted. I was airlifted to Puerto Rico, and the military doctors there saved my life. And I came to Jim Jones, and I came to the Guyana because I had just, my wife, after cesarean section, was not resuscitated after her son was born. And so when they finally did resuscitate her, her brain was dead. I mean, she was vegetable. So that's where I entered back into the People's Temple, because I didn't, I was in desperate straits. I was in the most vulnerable part of my life. And that's where I entered the People's Temple. I believed everything that Jim Jones said, everything. He was a healer, he was a political activist. People came through our temple all the time. We were a political force in San Francisco. But I went to a trial. We sued the doctor for medical malpractice, and I lost the case. And the defense was, well, she was too black. They couldn't tell she didn't have oxygen, which of course was ridiculous. We lost the case. I said, everything that Jim Jones said is right. This is a racist society. I have to get my son out of here. And so I went to Jonestown. That was my idea of a solution. I was also using drugs. So that was Fern's idea of a solution, was to go to Jonestown, where I thought it would be they would make me be a good socialist and a good communist. And when I got there, there were guns there. There was a rigidity there. Jim Jones had made a big jump in his deterioration. So he was much more addicted, and he was mentally not right. I didn't mean to tell the whole story. I was just going to introduce myself. But I came back from Jonestown pretty messed up. My son was murdered there. I wasn't able to get him out. And then it was a long period of healing. I wore a bag on my side, and I was pretty much a mess for years until I got help. My real healing started when I got into recovery from alcoholic drug addiction. And I ended up, believe it or not, being a police officer for 27 years. I just retired a couple of years ago. And very challenging, but very rewarding career. And just retired a couple of years ago. And I guess what I want to say is I have a rich, blessed life right now. I love 2015. It's great. So we're talking about something that happened in 1978. And for whatever reason, I've been loved by beautiful men, by beautiful women. I've been so blessed in my life. And I don't seem to fit into categories too well. But I know that when I fall in love, I fall in love. Whatever body you're in, I love you. So, anyway, I digress. But anyway, where are we going to take it from here? Are we going to... Okay, I did want to say that the whole People's Temple was a political movement disguised as a church. That's what we were really about. We're about socialism and creating a new society. And that was the dream we worked for. That was the dream we sacrificed for. And that was the cause that we worked for. And things went bad, especially in Jonestown. It was a very regimented 24-hour PA system. We had white nights, we had rehearsals, we had imaginary crises and things that were threatening our community. And in cults or coercive groups, there's a real strong us and them. There's a real strong, you're either right or you're wrong. You're either a friend or you're a foe. There's no in between. There's no dissent. You don't disagree. Laura and I disagree on some things, but I still love her. And that group, no. You didn't disagree. If you disagreed, then you were identified as a dissenter. And so we did. Well, I obeyed Jim Jones as much as I could because I wanted to be a part of creating this society. And on a personal level, I felt very powerless in my life. And yet then I got to be a part of something that was very powerful, a movement to change the society. And it's been a long road of recovery for me, for my mental health. I used any healing modality possible to heal. I was in a tremendous amount of psychic pain. The loss of my son, my responsibility in taking him to Jonestown. He was a 4-year-old child. He had no control over where he went. So through my journey, where I lived barely, my son lost his life. And that was the most difficult thing for me to deal with, is the loss of my son. And when I look back, all the experiences that I had made me the person I am today. Of course, if I could take it back, if I could make a different decision, I would definitely want my son not to die in Jonestown. But everything that happened made me the person I am. There's such a deep, deep pain that happened that I had to go there in order to survive. And so hopefully it's made me more compassionate towards other people, more empathetic towards others. And there's cults that go on today, religious, political. It's something maybe we can talk about later, about things to look for. If you're looking at you're joining a group, Laura said if there's no line of succession, but they want your money, don't have sex with you, they want you not to have any contact with your family, don't read the newspapers because they're all lies, are they geographically isolating you, are they asking you to do things that you normally wouldn't do? So there's lots of things to look for. Can you disagree? Can you disagree with everyone that you in the group and still be a member of the group? If you don't do what other people do in the group, is that okay? Are you made to comply? We had Laura talks about a lot of peer pressure that we had. And people were publicly punished sometimes, and that was to make an example for others. And we all wanted to be good socialists, whatever it took. And if you wanted to be a good socialist, if you want to work towards the cause, then you're willing to make certain sacrifices, unless you're really not sincere. So what length are you willing to go to accomplish the goal that you want to accomplish? How important it is to you? Or are you just a shallow, selfish person that is just talking? and so we were asked to make those sacrifices. And because I know that I wanted to be a good socialist. I wanted to, further the cause. If you were either a friend or a foe, nothing in between. Laura, do you want to say it? Sure, I'm sure Laura has.
So I think that one of the most interesting parts about who joins People's Temple is trying to figure out why did certain people decide that they wanted to join, who would come. Like, my sister was the one who found out about People's Temple, so she took me, and then as soon as she got there, she said, this isn't for me. So I want to know why, how did she have the smarts to say, you know what, obviously this guy is not for real, or somehow she was more astute than I was, and she left, even though my mother always blamed her. Like, when I came back, my mother always blamed my sister for taking me. But really, I am totally responsible that in my life, if I had, the road not taken, almost always in my life, I took the more difficult road. Always. We were talking earlier about college. Would I go to one college? No. I had to go to many colleges. So I went to University of Bridgeport for 3 years, Golden Gate University, Fresno Pacific, Fresno State, Sequoia Community. There wasn't any part of my path that I took in my whole life that was the easy, direct way. And so in a way with People's Temple, I said, okay, I'm done with the Black Panthers, I'm done with Woodstock, I'm going to go the direct path. And so I looked at Jim Jones, and he was everything that I was looking for in a hero of the day. He, talked to Angela Davis at night. He would, meet up with Cesar Chavez. I think Dennis Banks named his middle son after Jim's middle name or something, because Jim was supporting Leonard Pelletier. And there were just so many progressive things that he was doing that I was just sold on it. I said, I've met a person who can actually be a leader, and I feel like he'd be a protector. Because at the beginning, he took the role as a protector. He would find kids who were not fed properly, or whose parents were in prison or something, who were living with grandparents in dire circumstances. He'd scoop them up and have them be with somebody else, live with someone else, to take care of them or make sure they were fed. If there were seniors who didn't have any food to eat, he created a soup kitchen. We had our doctors give free medical care. We had attorneys give free legal aid. We wrote to judges who were having people appear in front of them saying, this person is a good candidate. People's Temple will supervise this person. So we had all these things in line to help people kind of be protected as they become useful citizens, as they became useful citizens. And so all of those things added up so that we felt that we were in the right place. And I know for myself, when I moved into People's Temple, I really thought that Jim Jones was my protector. I had been on my own and making lousy decisions, and I said, maybe now I can have somebody who is going to back me up and not let me get into harm's way. And so I thought of him as a protector, as most of the young people did in the temple. So then I joined and I started working really hard, and I loved it. Every day was exciting. And I was a philosophy major in college, and it didn't work for me because I'm much too hands-on. But when I moved into the temple, I became a Greyhound bus driver. I was head of security in Redwood Valley, so I would, be outside of Jim's house, seeing him coming and going. And, life is really exciting, unpredictable, and exciting. And when I would meet up with Jim Jones at different times, he was always a dramatic expert. He was a thespian. And so he would figure out some way to make every situation come out with him, the hero. So, he'd say, I'll take care of it, or I'll save you, or let me contact him, or whatever it is. He was always the hero. And so, I think all of us look for heroes who can help us during tough times. And so Jim was always installed himself in that position of being a hero. So I think that I was looking for somebody who could help me through tough times. And as Vern said, he was in a transitional period. His wife had just died. He had a 4-year-old son. He had no family support. And I was in a transitional period too, because I had left Connecticut, where I'd been divorced and, been involved with other things. I came to California looking for a new way to start, but you can't just decide to start something new it's just really hard to know where to begin. And so when I came out to California, I was making the same bad decisions. And my life seemed to be spiraling down. And then all of a sudden, Jim said, you know, I'm here, come live in Redwood Valley, I'll take care of you, you can do this work, I'll have you work on things that make a difference. And so he caught me at that, which road to take. Should I kind of be independent on my own and muddle through or not? And so I think that he was really a genius in the sense that he would see people come in the door and kind of size them up. Is this person, like my sister at that time, she was very committed to working with legal aid. So she had her job, she had, her friends, and was established. So she wasn't as prone to move in. I was new to California, I was new to the area, already making some lousy choices. I knew I wanted to work for integration, I wanted to work for a socialist dream I had, and so it seemed like the perfect place. Here's just one story. People's Temple, I think it's really hard to grasp how our guts really were interested in living the kind of community in People's Temple. I was at the 20th anniversary of Jonestown, and so different people were standing up and talking at the cemetery, the Evergreen Cemetery in Oakland. And so I stood up and I was talking and I cried, which I have been known to do. So I cried, and then a year or two later I was reading an article that somebody had written about the 20th anniversary, and it said there was a white woman who actually stood up and said she loved Jonestown and she was crying. And so I was racking my brain to say, let's see, a white woman, who would that have been? Because, when we were in People's Temple, we weren't a color. Like, we had kind of transcended that. You grow up in the United States and you see all whites on TV. You see the Academy Awards, the people who win are white. People who are nominated are white. Okay, there could be Selma and there could be McFarland, but the bottom line is the country really promotes shows with people who are not of color. And one of the treasures about People's Temple was we were not a color. We were brother and sister, and so that the person said, oh yeah, this white lady was crying, I just didn't get it that he was talking about me. Because in the People's Temple setting, I wasn't a color. Every place else, I teach 6th grade, that's an issue that comes up in 6th grade, with kids, 5th grade, even bilingual kindergarten, there are comments about people of different color or backgrounds or cultures. But in People's Temple, we have been retrained. Like anytime any comment was made that had a touch of racism, we'd be stopped and confronted about that. Because we had to be retrained. We were raised in a country that's racist. We had to be retrained, and Jim set about doing it. So if we went on a ride, we would never have like 2 whites in the front and black in the back. We would always integrate, even when we went to Texas. So I can remember going to Texas on one of the trips, and I was driving and we integrated the front seat, and people started following us through town. People who were racist and making comments. And we said, hey, we're not changing this, this is us. And we kept on traveling through Texas, but we were not going to compromise it. And so one of the real shames about People's Temple was, there's so many things we did not compromise on. We were not going to compromise by saying, oh, there's a little outside pressure to be, white only or white leadership or this or that or the other thing. We were not going to succumb to pressure from anybody else. It's like we had a justice system and we had so internalized it that we wanted to live by it. So we were all retrained. And even now, 36 years later, there's not really any community that I'm involved with that doesn't have some issues of race. Certainly our country is overcome with issues of race, whether it's Ferguson or undocumented workers coming in. There are so many issues of racism in our country. I try to not be infected by the racism in our culture. I want to be the way I was in the temple, where my sisters and brothers were all colors, and it's just really hard to find it. And so I'm part of the Quakers, and so And I am an activist. I work really hard with undocumented workers in California and San Diego. But it's just one of those, there's no way to get it right when you turn on TV, see it, you see people who are LGBTQ, who are mistreated. There's so much that needs to be done in our world. And I really, am looking for some kind of a group or momentum to get over the racism that's such a pandemic in our country. And so people still had that aspect. We had an insane leader, no question about it. We didn't watch him carefully enough. He really, at his best, he educated us, and at his worst, he killed 917 other people. So absolutely, he was a madman. But there were certain principles that we learned being part of People's Temple that are so absolutely basic for the human condition that, it has me still searching for where do I go so that I can sign up to, help move us along. And it's a really difficult time in American history that there's so much racism. And so I think of all the things that Jim Jones did, he was a political animal. And he started out as a minister of the Disciples of Christ. And all of that was a sham. Really, he was never a man of God. He was a man of power. He saw that ministers had power. But the thing he did is he did pluck people out of churches and say, okay, you can be religious, you can be an atheist like I was, you can be anything you want, but I'm moving you over to the left to be an activist. I don't care what your background was, but you're going to end up protesting things that are unjust. And so we were a very vocal group in San Francisco, and so much so that he got so powerful that the power went to his head, and that was one more problem that he didn't know how to deal with it. His ego was just outrageous, and so for somebody who was already dysfunctional, to have so much power and have people really hand over so much of the decision making and critical thinking and put it in his hands, he just abused it. Pretty much starting in 1972, he was in a position of abusing the power we had handed to him. Because we said, I want to go be with somebody who wants a utopian community, and then he took that to mean that we were giving him carte blanche with whatever he as a person would want to do. It was really his ideas, his thoughts, his planning that was so, I was so much in love with. And so in Jonestown, when he was getting sicker, he was more drug addicted, he was more out of it. Really, I wasn't watching what Jim Jones was doing. I was watching how the community was thriving. We had a new cottage every week. We had, the most fantastic talent, musical talent that I could imagine. People who, could easily have, been famous selling records and stuff. They were working on socialist songs in Jonestown. So we had all those things going. And Jim was kind of sidelined, which of course somebody with his ego didn't like. And so with all the other problems, he had to take control more and more, and was disintegrating under the pressure. So I think in Jonestown, what happened is all of us, or most of us in Jonestown who liked it, we fell in love with the community. We said, okay, I'm going to work really hard because we have more people coming down. I want there to be enough housing. I want there to be enough fruit trees that are going to mature in a couple of years. I want this thing to happen, that thing to happen. And oh yeah, Jim's over here. Well, he got us here. He did us favors along the way, but we didn't babysit him and we didn't watch him carefully enough as he fell apart. And we didn't know that he was such, that his illness was infecting those around him so much. But I think the people at the worst disadvantage were the ones who had been pulled into his inner circle because they had to experience him declining, and then that insanity caught hold with them and they became as bad as he did. And in fact, when he was incoherent the last day, they were the same people who had been close to him who were the ones who carried out the plans. It was his nurses and mistresses who handed out the poison, who set up the vat, and who did all the things in Jonestown because he wasn't able to do it. So in a way, their lives were the ones that were so completely messed up, even down to the people leaving in the show on the plane who was shooting people. I mean, it was all, Jim was able to infect a lot of people. And so that's why everything that, the introduction of everybody can do bad, I mean, if I hadn't been in Jonestown, I could see myself saying, I would never do that. Because, I mean, who would do that? Nobody would do that. And yet I did. And so part of me knowing who I am today is, I was not careful enough. I turned off my critical thinking, no excuses, but it'll never happen again. And I have to educate people not to do it, and to tell them about the people who died, who were all courageous people who wanted to make a difference. They were not people who just said, oh yeah, I'm going to follow this guy to this country I'd never heard of. These were people who said, okay, I'm committed to make the world better, and I am going to do whatever sacrifice it takes. And so they went to Guyana thinking the sacrifice was moving from San Francisco into the tropics, into this remote area, but they didn't know at the time that Jim's plan was a much worse sacrifice, that they had to sacrifice their lives. And there really is a ripple effect that those people who died, 917 people died besides Jim, but really their loss has affected so many people. People, adults who have none of their children to take care of them as they die. I mean, we have seen really horrible, sad situations of the people who were not in Jonestown and how they've had to go on with their lives without their loved ones. It's been there's really a great tragedy about that too. So, do you have more you want to say, or do you want to ask a question?
Just that Laura and I are different people. We have different experiences. So I was like a grunt. I had no part of the governing part. Laura was a counselor. I was shot, she wasn't. So I didn't think Jonestown was a wonderful place. The best thing about Jonestown was our camaraderie and working towards a common goal. The worst thing about Jonestown was Jim Jones. Because from all accounts, before he got there, it's a pretty nice place. So that's all I wanted to say. And then how important community is. Community is very important to me to this day. And I joined a spiritual group. That's how I got to Maui 32 years ago. It certainly wasn't a cult, but it was a spiritual group, people coming together for a spiritual cause. And we worked together, and that fell apart because we're all subject to the human condition. We're all challenged, and so that's how I got here. Because I wasn't going to rip myself off and say, I'm not going to participate in life because this happened to me. So I did take a chance, and fortunately that turned out, the group didn't survive, but I did, and it wasn't a damaging, horrible experience.
So, do you have questions? Any questions that have come up, or did we skip over some basic information?
I have a lot of questions I can say.
Yay!
I guess first, in discussion with this class, we learned a lot about, like when Congressman Ryan came out, and we heard that you guys had 3 days that you actually kept him out until you allowed him in for rehearsal. What exactly did you guys rehearse for those 3 days?
So, I just found this out. First of all, when Congressman Ryan said he was coming down, Jim bought off all the airplanes so that Ryan could not get into Jonestown. So for 3 days, he tied up all the airplanes out of Georgetown so that Ryan couldn't get in. And so Jim said, no, you can't go, you can't go. And so Ryan just didn't go home. So he just outwaited Jim, and finally it was very expensive. Jim said, this is a waste of money. I don't want to keep waiting, so I'm going to go ahead and free up the planes. And that's how Ryan even got to Jonestown. So, Jim was trying to manipulate the situation so Ryan didn't get there. And in some ways, Ryan expected not to get in. So I think what we practiced is we practiced if he came, the services and the music and all the programs. And actually, you were there. I wasn't there during that part.
You were in
I
Georgetown?
was in Georgetown those 2
Yeah,
days.
he went back and forth. He was going to let him in, he wasn't going to let him in, he was going to let him in, he wasn't going to let him in. And we rehearsed over and over and over and over again about what we were going to say. You know, at one point we were going to all meet him on the road, and another part we were going to, you know, welcome him in. So he was really of two minds. And his counselors and his attorney said, let him in. And so they came in with those examples.
Was there a plan to attack?
Yes, I recall that there was a plan to attack him at one point, but that was abandoned. Sort of, right, because he was attacked. Somebody tried to cut his throat. Any other questions?
Was the suicide rehearsed? Sorry.
Yes.
Is that
It was a white night, and there was a danger outside the community. So what it was we come together, and there is no other choice. We're surrounded. There's no other choice. We have to commit revolutionary suicide, lay down our lives for our political cause, like the terrorists do. They'll blow themselves up because they believe in something. But we were going to commit revolutionary suicide, and it was practice. But really what it was, since in a cult there is no dissent. You don't disagree. So, we go, okay, what do you folks think about this? You know, about us committing revolutionary suicide? Well, maybe you say, I don't want to do it. You know, that's not, I don't want to do it. I want to do something else. You're a dissenter. You know, if you disagreed, you're a dissenter. He just identified his opponents. And so we did have practices. The number of times is, we differ on that. So I don't know how many times it was, but we did have these, we were always up all night. The people there were very sleep deprived, and you don't make good decisions when you haven't had sleep for a long period of time.
But we never had, like, handed out juice, and we were never, like, told this is poison. The one time that happened was once with just the Planning Commission in San Francisco in about 1974. There was juice handed out, and Jim said, okay, you just all had poison because we're going to commit revolutionary suicide. And then he had set people up to fall off their chairs. And then afterwards he said, okay, that was just to find out how dedicated you were. Wow. But,
that early.
you know, the part about that is that, you know, Jim was always unpredictable. And part of it was because he had this great following of people, and we had services Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday night. If he didn't do something somewhat bizarre, people wouldn't want to come. They say, yeah, I went Thursday night, I don't have to go back. So really he made a huge effort to have something at every meeting that people would feel like they missed if they weren't there. Like one day he'd throw down the Bible. He said, if there's a God, strike me dead, and he'd throw the Bible. So that would be one day. Another day he might jump off the you know, where he was standing, up the throne or the stage, and have his cape and everything flying around him. But he always had some sense of drama to kind of keep people awake and interested in coming back. And so for me, you know, I just figured that was one more of his sham. I didn't believe it ever because, you know, he had never done anything like that before. And so a lot of the things that he did, I'd say, okay, has this ever happened in history? No. Has Jim ever done anything like that? No. And I would kind of figure out reasons not to take it seriously. There was no point of reference that you could say, oh, yeah, remember what he did to that guy? There was nothing like that because all the things that Jim had done that were controversial were kept secret. He was doing things. If people left, he was threatening them, saying, don't talk about it. You know, I don't know if people were beaten up, but it could be that people were beaten up if they left and they were going to talk. So I don't know, but a lot of that kind of stuff was kept secret. But Jim was a thespian, and he did act out. And sometimes I talk, you know, I'm in 6th grade, and if I'm talking to my students and they say, I don't have a pencil, I say, what? You're in 6th grade and you don't know to come with a pencil to school every day? Like, as if it's a big deal. Because that's part of the drama of, you know, having kids take a pencil or something. Not that it's a big deal. And so he did everything like that. Everything was done with a certain, you know, kind of excitement or thrill or challenge or something. And that's how he kept people coming back. And so it was hard to know that really that was preparing us for his eventual plan, but we didn't have a source of, a reference point to know that. Yeah.
So if he identified a dissenter, right?
Mhm.
So what about dissenter? So what's the consequence of the dissenter?
Well, for one thing, to be watched. You know, if you said you were unhappy, people would say, okay, so whenever you talk to Vern, know that he's, you know, not happy here, and, you know, let me know if it's a problem, or try and cheer him up, or, you know, just be aware that he's somebody that if we ever are challenged, make sure that you notice what he's doing, or something like that, right?
Yeah, there was different punishments, so like, there was what was that crew? The work crew?
The work crew, yeah.
The work
public
crew,
services.
shave your head, and you had to run around all over the place and do what they said. But in the severe cases, I was in the Jonestown little hospital because I had a edema on my leg, and some people were drugged, and some dissenters were drugged, and or people who didn't want to have sex with Jim Jones, so one young girl who did not want to. They fed her sedatives. So that's one of the ways that dissenters were dealt with.
But they can run away, right? I mean, they can escape, right?
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
We'll tell you this. The compound is from Georgetown. This is in the middle of the jungle. It's 24 hours, 19 hours of a river to go up. It's in the middle of nowhere. I mean, nowhere. You have some of them are Indians, maybe on canoes or something. You have no communication with the outside world, none. Say in a huge area, say Honolulu, the whole Honolulu area, maybe 3 ham radios. That's it. No telephones, no transportation. And then we always had this thing where Jones said, you know there's panthers out there. You know there's cats. You know that, don't you? Snakes, all this stuff. And so a lot of it was fear and intimidation. But when I was there, I didn't see anybody escape successfully. People tried, but they were not. And so one of the things they did was, say you escaped, and you made it to Khartoum, they would call and say, you know, so-and-so is on his way. You know he's a child molester, don't you? Can you hold him for us?
yeah.
So already, you know, it was very, very difficult.
I think an interesting contrast between the two cults that I was in, Synanon and People's Temple. In People's Temple, you couldn't leave. And in fact, we did have a child molester, and Jim would not send him out. He said, you know what, we can take care of him, we'll just monitor him. We'll just watch him. And of course, that didn't work there any better than any place else. Jim refused to ever say somebody else could step in and handle this. So nobody could leave. And so in Synanon, where I lived for 10 years, basically if you didn't go to work every day, they said, you know, bye. You know, so it was such a different point of view because there was nobody's ego involved. If you weren't working, they weren't there to babysit you. Work or get out, which is really the way it should have been in Jonestown. You know what, if you're not happy here, we should have had busloads or boatloads of people go out just because we didn't want them there. I didn't want them next door to me. If they're going to whine, if they're not happy, they should just go out. What is the point of keeping people who are unhappy? It makes no sense. But Jim would not let anybody go. He took it as a personal betrayal. He would never say, oh yeah, this person wants to go out and get married and have kids. He would never allow somebody else to make a choice of what they wanted as an adult, you know, as a grown adult who wants something other than living in a remote jungle.
There was corporal punishment. So the child molesters she's talking about, they beat the shit out of him, that's what they did. And he did not change his behavior. You know, and so there was corporal punishment if you violated the rules, and in front of everyone. So, like say something happened here, and they decided, let's have a boxing match. Laura gets the shit beat out of her. You're all watching. That's what happens when you violate the rules. You should see it right here. So it's a reinforcement of what the rules are.
What if somebody stood up and said, don't do that?
I don't know if anybody ever did.
Yeah, I think that, what I said before is really, Jim was a master manipulator. He'd say, did you hear what he said? What do you guys have to say about that? And then everybody would shout you down. Like he wouldn't even get involved, but he'd wait on peer pressure to argue you out of it, or at least sit you down or shut you up or something. Or, he manipulated the crowd. And that's why, sometimes when Vern talked about guns, Jim had this brainwashed into thinking that we could not escape or go anyplace else. And it didn't take guns, it didn't take anything else. He had us persuaded, there are wild animals out there, there are all these, pythons and whatever else. You don't want to go into the jungle by yourself, and you certainly don't want to be there at night, and you can't really go far because you don't have a passport, and you don't have any money to transport yourself down to Georgetown. I mean, he kind of eliminated all the ways that you could do it, like just walking out, because you're going to run into people. So he eliminated that option by making it too difficult and dangerous.
There were no cell phones either.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
But in San Francisco, before you left, right? In San Francisco, he cannot do this because if he do this, you're gonna just walk out the door, right? But then suddenly, when you move to the new compound, he's doing this. Do you think like the people, the 900 people, they really accept this? When they were in San Francisco, he's not doing it. When they're in the compound, he's doing it. Do you think the 900 people are gonna agree with this? Easily accept this? Easily?
It's a very long period of indoctrination. We're talking about years. And in San Francisco, he wasn't in the place where he was. And in Jonestown, there was a big jump in his behavior. So all this was very, very, very gradual, until to the very end. I had 5 years there. I don't know how many years Laura had. So people there really didn't have a choice, and maybe they did. Like she said, I am responsible for my life. I'm responsible for every decision I made. I abdicated my responsibility to Jim Jones. I abdicated my responsibility sometimes to spiritual teachers, wives, husbands, whatever. But I am responsible for my life.
How did that place get funded? Like, how did funds go into the compound and stuff? Like, where did you get the
Well, she talked about legal aid. If you had a lawsuit, they would take the money.
Compound, like, pretty much in the middle of nowhere.
Well, first of all, the government of Guyana was really interested in populating the area because they had a border dispute with Venezuela. So they were delighted that People's Temple moved in there and was going to have a medical center and stuff. So they gave it to us really cheaply on a lease. And then, Jim Jones he collected tithing, and I always laugh, if you have shoes that have penny loafers, that have a penny in it, you could be sure that by the time you left, you had already given up the penny. Like he somehow could take a collection, and if you had that dime, that's been around in the bottom of your purse for a couple of days, and you say, oh yeah, I'll use that for parking, you would not leave with a dime. He was like, you felt like his eyes would bore into you until you emptied out every last penny. So he took collections always, and the one area that, he seemed to be more careful than anything else is money. He never spent money. He didn't buy riches, he didn't have a limo, he didn't have fancy belongings and stuff. He was really into power. He used sex for power. He, talked to politicians for power. He was really into power, but he was very careful with money. And he had to make every decision. When I lived in Georgetown, there was a woman who came in to do work in Georgetown, and the only thing she had brought with her was high heels. And it took him 3 days to decide that she should buy tennis shoes. So he was a hands-on, he was like, anal retentive about everything having to do with money. And he had to make every decision.
He built people out of the money that they had. Property, everything. I lived communally in all those years. I gave all my money. But it was for the cause of socialism. It was for the dream, for the change. And Laura, I'm sure, gave whatever money she had. And all those people, those hundreds and hundreds of people gave all their money. And really, compared to cults today, or we didn't really have that much money, like 20 million or something like that. But yeah, it was funded from older women's Social Security, or older people's Social Security, everything.
But you know, the average Social Security of people in Jonestown was about $300. So it wasn't Social Security that made it, but it was Jim's collections, and then he had, you know, like prayer claws, and he could pray for you if you wanted a healing. He had a lot of gimmicks that would sell, oils that pray for you, and people, there was like hundreds of letters came in a day asking for him to pray for different people and with donations. So, and so probably at the end, probably 300 of us lived communally. I worked in social work, and so all that money was turned in, and then someone else oversaw what we needed to buy. So I mean, he was just very careful with money. That was one area that he didn't go wild on. Maybe the only area. Yes.
As you're observing things in the temple not being so great or being pretty bad, how did you communicate with others? If you you couldn't speak up to, be dissent. So how did you communicate with people, like, behind closed doors, when there weren't meetings?
Not in Jonestown. Not in Jonestown usually. If you did, you were taking a really huge risk. And I did that because I confided in the person I was sharing a loft with that I wanted to leave. And he confided in another woman who told me, he said, let's get out of here. Let's get the hell out of here. And so we began to talk to each other. We weren't supposed to. We weren't supposed to go into little groups away from people. But before we went to the temple, I guess you could talk about whatever you wanted, but somebody may turn you in for being a counter-revolutionary, a traitor to the cause. I think that a dirty word was capitalist.
Yeah. So you would never be called, selfish or boring, but you could be called a counter-revolutionary or too bourgeois. Of course, you didn't like it. You have money, you want to buy things with it. So, I mean, they were all political terms. Trying to tell you, oh yeah, you're not going to be a good socialist anyway. Why do I worry about you? You've already betrayed the cause. Everything was, that kind of jargon. Did you have a question?
Yeah. So you say Jim Jones used power for sex.
Yeah.
How did his wife take that?
My sense of things, and her kids don't talk about it, but my sense of things is that Jim was so powerful that he told his wife that if she ever let out a peep of what was really going on with him, he'd take the kids and she'd never see them. So I think he was blackmailing her with the kids who she loved dearly. So, but he had a mistress way before I joined the temple. Carolyn Lane was his mistress from probably 1968 on. And besides that, he would screw men and women, whoever he felt, he really would like to take that position of, being in charge or power.
She suffered.
Yeah. Yeah, she suffered. She suffered.
And so does his son.
Yeah.
Because he took his son with him and made him listen outside the door and said, the reason that you have your problem is because I act better than you. I mean, who says that to the kid? He was just very, very, very abusive person in some sentences. And then sometimes he'd be, kind and all this kind of stuff. So he was a mixed bag.
Laura, how much do you think you contributed personally to the development of Jonestown?
Well, there are lots of aspects of Jonestown. How much did I contribute to Jim's insanity?
Yeah.
I mean, because there was actually a structure of Jonestown, and I worked hard, so I had a lot to do with that and people getting fed every day because I worked in the field and did stuff like that and ran an agricultural crew. So, I mean, I helped people get fed every day, but we had 1,000 people to feed 3 meals a day, so it seemed like a lot to me, but I was just one of many. But in terms of Jim's insanity, I mean, I think, from early on, I gave up much too much of my critical thinking to him. And, what that did is then people would meet me and they say, oh yeah, well, if Laura believes it, that's probably good. So, I think that we each influenced other people who met us. They say, oh yeah, Laura wouldn't put up with crap. So if she believes it, I believe it. So, I think that it was damaging. In a way, I'm fortunate because when I was in the temple, I didn't know anybody. The people who really, I think, have a really hard time, like our friend Tim Carter, who brought in his sister and brother, and then they brought in 5 or 6 or 8 more people from the San Mateo area. So there was a group of people who had been in high school together, and they were good friends, and they all died, except for Tim. And so, we're all, I feel like I'm as guilty as I could possibly be and still survive. And I think all of us are as guilty as we could possibly be and still survive. And I'm still delighted that I didn't bring 10 people in besides me. I just think that it couldn't have been any worse for any of us.
I remember one thing about the financing was one time we were begging on the street with cans with the starving children on it, and it was supposed to be for starving children. So say I got in trouble, which I did. I got in trouble a lot. Okay. So, Bird smoking cigarettes, $200 by Friday. I raised $200 by Friday. Because I go down to the Tenderloin and the prostitutes were very generous. They all these starving children, we give $5, $10. And so we did that. We caught you drinking. Okay, you got to raise $400. And I did. And it wasn't hard. People were generous because they thought they were helping starving children.
Where are the prostitutes in the middle of the jungle?
No, when I was in San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
Jungle prostitutes, very rare, very rare.
We're good.
In San Francisco, sorry.
Did you believe at the time that the money was going to starving children, or did you know that it was going?
I know it was going to the temple, but the temple wasn't really the cause.
I know earlier we were talking a little bit that Jim Jones had a drug problem. It's kind of a multi-question. Were there other people? And regardless of that, how was he actively using drugs in Jonestown? Like, how was he getting there? I'm just curious if it's such a secluded location. How are you getting the supply and stuff like that?
I think he took Benzodrine because he wanted to stay up all night so he could work for the people, for the cause. That's what he was doing. So he had a reason, for everything. And he would, there was somebody dying of cancer in Jonestown, and he took their meds. He took it from people. And he had people that, like I was telling Laura, a nurse at a hospital, she was stealing drugs from him. She got busted. We hit her out in one of the communes and then shipped her up to Guyana before her trial came. So he had people stealing drugs for him. I don't know if he had people buying drugs for him.
But also, we ran a hospital in Jonestown. So all you have to do is requisition the drugs. Drug companies, they're not going to say, oh no, we're not sending them. So, the doctors would say, okay, we have a clinic here, we need all this kind of drugs. And then they would order the drugs. So once he was in Jonestown, it was pretty clear sailing. So, and somebody asked earlier about how the guns got in Jonestown. Well, we used to ship cargo boxes, and they had false bottoms. So that's how the guns got in, and drugs and anything else that we had to worry about. The one thing that he kind of went directly for is the cyanide at the end. He said he was making jewelry. So he had ordered in all this order of cyanide to start making jewelry, which I don't know if he ever really planned for jewelry, but he had the cyanide in Jonestown for at least 6 months. So part of his planning, I think he hadn't put the whole picture together, but he knew, I think as his health was deteriorating, I think he started forming the idea in his mind that he was going to have everybody die. Yes?
I have this very big puzzle in my mind. So, for example, we practicing the white knight and drinking juice, I think that's one thing, right? But then we really see the white knight really happening and drinking poison. Somebody gonna drink it, and have a twisted face, right? And
Yes.
making all this noise.
It's a horrible death.
Then how about the second person gonna see this and then drinking the poison again? It's not like a practicing now, right?
You have people with guns all around you, too.
But even the people with guns drank poison, so.
Yeah, they,
I mean, I don't know of anybody who was there, but I know that the doctor in Jonestown did work with the cyanide so that it would be flavored and so it would be easier to take. And so I don't know. I do know the pictures of the people who died in Jonestown, they were not what you would expect with foaming mouths and stuff like that. So I'm not sure, at that stage, there are not really any survivors who talk about what that part was about. But just the bodies and the pictures and things that came back, it did not look like it was a straight cyanide kind of death, which people, a lot of people have talked to me about saying, they don't understand it was cyanide, but the deaths, looking at the people, they did not look like people who died by cyanide. And so I think it was a mixture of different drugs that, somehow had some other look to it.
you're basically asking how could this happen?
Yes, because I mean, really asking somebody, order somebody just cut the throat. 900 people just following that order, I really feel how even an insane person, how are they gonna do this? 900 of them, that's insane at the same time, cut the throat, I mean, drink the poison.
I don't think there was a democracy at that place at that time.
But I mean, it's still for one thing, I think people, we had never practiced with drinking the poison before, so that hadn't happened before, and it turned out not to be poison, except for a very small group in San Francisco. So the majority of people in Jonestown had never done that. So this was the first time they had the use, but as soon as they brought the vats out, I would imagine that they knew that was poison. And so I just think, Jim gave people no choice in their death. He said, we've conspired to kill a congressman, you're going to be held accountable, your life will never be the same. You can't go home and say, okay, I'm going to start over because you're going to be a co-conspirator to kill a congressman. You've already given me your house, you've emptied out your bank account, your family doesn't want to have anything to do with you, they don't have money to support you. Anything that you had going, a job or anything like that, you don't have that to go back to. Your children are going to be, children of felons and face more prejudice than they ever had before if you keep them, or they'll be put in foster care. So he eliminated all the thinking that would have allowed people to think they could survive.
Lied a lot.
So you don't think he lied to the people, that's not poison, that's just another drug? He will tell people that's
He told
poison.
people it was poison because there was no choice. See, that was the lie. That was the lie, that there was no choice. Because in a way, what Vernon and I do every day is prove that you can get by, you can go home, and you can survive. Because we proved it. We prove it every day. Every day that we have a good day, we prove that he was absolutely wrong and he was lying.
So with your experience with Jonestown, can you tell now another organization going to turn into Jonestown or not? For example, like the Salvation Army, they are doing these nice things, helping people. Do you think they're going to turn into Jonestown?
Well, I mean, that's our job to educate people. I mean, there are many groups that have as many sick leaders as Jim Jones. Jim Jones is not the only and the worst. There are many, many leaders. Some people contact me every day and say, you know what, this leader kept me chained to a bed until I ran away at 17. And then she went into recovery and stuff like that. So people are in a bad way around the United States and elsewhere. So there are many horrible leaders who keep people enslaved. So all we can do is talk about it and say, watch out, and hear the signs. And never say things are so good. You don't watch every aspect. And watch that, people who are powerful are the ones who are most apt to be corrupted by the power. Don't give them your power. Keep your power. So, I mean, that's why we speak. Because before Jonestown, there was no situation that, like Jonestown, where somebody who we thought was a benevolent leader killed people. Now we know. It doesn't matter how somebody appears. People are crazy. And they could be crazy and look as sane as you or me, but they are crazy and you have to be careful. Just like a con man, Jim was a con man who controlled 1,000 people. And so you have to be careful, and you have to talk about it, and you have to educate people. It doesn't matter what people say. And if somebody says, you know, you have no choice because you don't have money, you don't have a job, say, you know what, that's not true. I always have a choice. And so, I mean, anyway, that's our job. That's our job to educate you. That's your job to remember and tell your kids. Don't forget, it doesn't matter what it looks like. You never trust somebody with the decisions you have to make.
Other people have questions too. Are there other questions?
On the mass suicide, did anyone pretend to die? Like pretend to drink it and then really survive? Or was it everybody?
The only person we know was a woman who stayed in bed and just pretended to sleep through it, and then she survived. And that was Hyacinth Thrash, and she wrote a book, The Onlyest One Alive.
I thought she was under the bed.
Well, you know, she was under her covers or bed, I don't know, but she's dead, so we can't ask her now. She lived through it. Yeah. Yes.
Did you guys know each other back then?
Yeah. We've been friends for 45 years. Since 1972. I can remember very well, he was just a type.
So I just have some questions. Another thing is, from both of you telling the story, telling the history there, I kind of get the feeling that when you are vulnerable, you get into the cult, right? Get hurt. But then is that the message you're trying to say? Then if I feel like I'm not vulnerable right now, I'm not going to be getting involved. Was that the right message, a take-home message?
No, that's what I was talking about before. If you join a group, you know, can you dissent? You know, is there corporal punishment? Do you have to give your money? Are they separating you from your family? You know, are you asked, do they want to have sex with you? You know, is there ulterior motives? Are you being kept away? Is all your time being used and occupied so you don't have time to look at things? You know, are you being asked to do something that you are not sure that you want to do? So those are all the signs I would look for in a group. Where's the money? Where's the money going?
The other thing, though, is that, I mean, I am vulnerable to civil rights issues today. I am vulnerable to the human condition. I always want to be that way. I want to be sensitive to things I see that are screwed up in the world, and I want to fix them. So, in the sense of seeing it, taking it to heart, I want to be vulnerable. I don't want to be so arrogant to say, you know, I'm privileged. There's a whole white privilege a conference of people who are privileged. I have lived a privileged life as a white person. I am not going to let that keep me from noticing what's going on. And so, in a way, vulnerable is not a bad thing. Vulnerable means you're sensitive to people and looking at what's going on. Stupid is another thing. And I was stupid. But vulnerable by itself, I don't know that being vulnerable, you know, is a bad thing. You just have to always be careful. But being stupid, you know, there's not much way to go back and fix that. But I mean, I was really stupid. I was more than vulnerable. I was global. So, I mean, it's really different. But, I mean, vulnerable, people I like are people who are vulnerable. People who are undocumented workers, they're vulnerable. They are at risk. And so, I mean, I would hope I'd always be sensitive to that or participate in that or work with that and not be cynical. I don't want to be cynical. Even with as much as we've gone through, I don't think either one of us is considered cynical. I have certain standards. I don't compromise anything having to do with civil rights or human rights or all these other things. I don't compromise. But, I mean, I am an idealist. I know things can get better. So I'm not going to live a life as a cynic or filled with hate. I don't want to do either of those things.
How long, I guess, in your recovery did it take to gain the ability to trust someone or fall into some kind of leadership, not position, but yeah, I guess just trust. What was the effect on that?
When I returned to San Francisco, I was involved in, democratic clubs, and I looked for some gay socialists, and there was a very few gay socialists, and I hung out with them. but I really didn't have my mind to really participate in anything. You know, and socialism for me died a slow death. Maybe when the Berlin Wall came down. I just really thought that it was the answer to everything.
I think I only trust myself.
Oh.
Current.
Yeah, there's not anybody else I trust 100%. And there are a lot of people I trust as long as I keep watching. And I mean, I trust my husband because I've tortured him enough to know. But I mean, really, I'm the only one I trust. Because I found out that people who are really good-hearted are sometimes the stupidest of us. And I was good-hearted and I was really stupid. So I only trust myself, and I have a high standard that I need to be absolutely sure about things. And I don't want to put trust in anybody else. I'm not interested in that. That's not something I value in somebody else. I want somebody to be honest, you know, all those other things. When it comes to trust, me, I'm the one I trust.
I trust.
Thank you.
Pondering a question?
It's for Mr. Vernon. How did this experience impact your life forward, especially with 20-something years as a police officer? Granted that now he's not New York or Chicago,
Yeah.
but how did that kind of affect your perspective of the job?
It changed my whole life, actually, completely. When and policemen can be very cynical and jaded because you're dealing with you're seeing a certain section of the population, and nobody comes to the police station because they're having a great day. It's really wonderful. When you're having a low day, you got to get the restraining order, somebody ripped you off, you're trying to get a divorce, you're trying to get custody of the kids, the whole 9 yards. But and there's this kind of a belief sometimes that people don't change. They're the same. They're always going to be the same. And I know that that's not true because I've transformed. So when I look at that person sitting across from me, I go, that could be me. It's just a couple of bad choices. So I look at that person as I could be that person. So I think it gives me a deeper empathy and compassion for other people. And, it just was, I did so many things that I never really got caught for. It's like, I could be that person. And I look for the light in each person. I really do. I look for the good in the light. Because if I look, I can see it. Usually.
So,
What was the point when you started feeling like you could now more trust, or when you felt like life was turning around, that you can see the light in life when it wasn't all the darkness and things and so on?
To trust again?
To live
Turn your
again.
life about, yeah.
Yeah.
I still trusted. I still trusted people. I didn't give up my ideals. I joined a spiritual group, and was a hopeless romantic, so I trusted. I kept falling in love with men or women or whatever, and I was just,
I think that for about 10 years, I just put everything on the shelf. I didn't think about trusting. I just kept thinking about putting one foot in front of the other and kind of doing what I wanted to do. But I felt self-conscious laughing and smiling because I thought, a survivor shouldn't be able to laugh this soon after. So really, for about, when I joined the temple, I was pretty frivolous, and I could laugh at everything. Everything was a big yuck, and so I think for about 10 years, if I was too happy, then I have to calm myself down and say, okay, that's not appropriate. Then after about 10 years, my son was born. I started thinking, give yourself a break. And so it took about 10 years for me to say, okay, I guess I've survived. I guess I'm moving on. I guess I have to kind of live life to the fullest. And then somewhere along the line, I said, I have to prove Jim Jones wrong, that we can survive this and keep going. So, but it took me about 10 years not to feel guilty when I was too happy.
I lost 2 partners to AIDS. And it gave me the perspective that every day is precious. I'm grateful for my life. We talked about it earlier. I didn't deserve to live any more than all those 300 children or those 900 people, but I have, and I'm here. So I'm grateful for this grace that I don't understand. Yeah.
Yes.
We heard you speak earlier on living in Guyana and Jonestown. What are you expecting to see when you go?
Just for me.
What I said earlier is I've done these oral history, and it came up that I really would like to make a final trip to Guyana. And so I just sent around to the 60 survivors I'm in touch with. Okay, what do you think? Anybody interested? And within 24 hours, 22 people wrote back and said they want to go, which I was totally amazed by. So for me, I think I just want to see that life has continued in the area of Guyana. I did fall in love with Guyana. I thought it was the most beautiful country. It was mixed race, and there were not racial issues there. Then it's more problematic, I think, lately. But I mean, I just thought it was a beautiful country, and really, if there's ever a heaven, it's going to look like that. So I expect to see Guyana, the beautiful country, and show that we didn't do permanent damage to the country. I think is the main thing.
I have a different perspective on Guyana. It is a socialist country. The people there have nothing. They have nothing. Nothing. They have nothing. And so I was surprised by that, or at least what I saw. I had to go back twice already. I went back for a hearing for Larry Layton and a trial for Larry Layton. And I think I drank the whole way through it. That's the best I could do at the time.
So I don't know if you heard me say, the other thing was, one of the people who's going back just wants to go to Georgetown. He doesn't want to go into Jonestown. And so I said, well, why would you want to go to Georgetown? He said, because that's when I started my life over on November 18th. So he's going to kind of saying, okay, I am closing this door, and I am revisiting, I mean, in a way, kind of like he was born again. That's when he was born again, November 18th, the day after, or the 19th. So he feels like he wants to go back to revisit that determination that kept him, straight and, going ahead at that moment. So, I mean, I think we're all going back for different things. Some people are going, like one young man who's 26 wants to go because his parents were in People's Temple, and they never talked to him much about it, so he's full of questions. And another woman who's a nurse, who was a nurse in People's Temple, her husband and son went to see it. So, I mean, it's like People's Temple is made up of people from so many different points of view and trying to understand it. Everybody has a different reason to want to go back. In a way, that's why it's so interesting, I think.
Another question there.
Yes.
I think your story and everything you have to say to everyone is very inspiring. So my question for you would be, what would you say, both of you, what would you say to someone who's going through their darkest time? What would be your best advice?
Don't give up. You don't know what's right around the corner. You don't know your strength. Just don't give up. No matter what, don't give up. And things can change. Things can look really dark, and then all of a sudden, things can turn around in ways totally unexpected. Totally, because I've seen it happen with people.
So when you have a very painful history experience like this, what would you suggest as a working mechanism to forget or make peace with this painful history?
That's each person's journey. It really is. How do I find peace within myself? How does she find peace within herself? It is a really individual journey, and nobody can do it but that person.
I think also accepting that that's part of who you are, and not just closing the door. Like if you have a really painful experience, I don't think it helps if you don't at some point address it. The survivors who are the best off of the 85 or so survivors, the ones who are best off are the ones who say, you know what, I totally blew it. I made this horrific decision and was involved with this horrific thing, and that is part of me, and now I'm moving on. That's part of me, and I couldn't move on until I resolved that hole in my heart. And really, it made a huge difference. And the people who say, no, I can't touch it, it's too hurtful, they just get caught at that spot. So, I think, full disclosure helps you, you just have to find a safe setting that people don't throw you out or something. But I think you have to talk about it in some setting. Yes.
Was there ever a point where a red flag came out, you saw something, you're like, maybe that's, there's something else going on here, or was it just so gradual that you didn't realize it until you're too far to come back?
Well, Vern and I had different points of view. Mine is, if I saw something I didn't like, I said, well, you know what, that's not going to happen again. We'll work through that. But look at all these great things. And so, in a way, I didn't trust myself. The part that said, I don't really like the way that happened. And there are things that happened in Jonestown that I'm not happy about at all. And at the time, I said, yeah, but we have to keep going forward because we have this socialist cause. So I allowed the unallowable to happen because I thought there was a bigger picture. The whole controversy of means to an end, and I excuse things that I should never have excused.
I forgot what the question was. Oh, the red flags, yes. Sorry. They were there all along. The little voice was inside all along, and I ignored it. And the red flags keep coming up, and I ignored them because I wanted to be a part of, and I wanted to be a part of this social change. So for me, it was there. And I made a decision each time to continue on.
Knowing that bringing up your son was such a topic, why was it that you were not able to get him out along with you when you were able to leave?
I was in such a mental state that I didn't even know if I was doing the right thing. And, I will regret that decision for the rest of my life. It's something that I live with every day. And it's been the most difficult thing I've ever had to deal with. It's been really, really, really difficult.
Would you say that was part of the reason, as far as your drug addiction and your alcohol addiction after Jonestown, would you say that might be the main cause?
No. I was a drug addict before, alcoholic before. It just gave me another reason to drink, another reason to use. And addicts and alcoholics, they really don't need a reason. Oh yeah, I definitely drank myself into unconsciousness or drug myself into unconsciousness because of that. Because I wanted to blot it out. I didn't want to look at it. I didn't want to look at my part.
Since we're still talking about your son, I heard that a lot of the children didn't spend time with their family. Did you spend time with your son, in Jonestown?
I did, but they tried to break families up. So you would take care of my son, I would take care of your son, you would take care of other. It was a real communal atmosphere, and that was considered to be more healthy. So, but really what it was breaking down the family unit and breaking down the allegiance to the parents. But yes, I lived in a commune with 19 children, and each adult had had children to take care of, and then none of them were mine. But I did see my son because we had services all the time. Sunday night, Wednesday, Thursday. We were doing stuff all the time, so I did see him and spend time with him, but not in a traditional sense.
This is kind of a long question. I want to say a couple of things before I ask the question. First of all, as soon as I sat down, I realized I forgot to explain why you're heroes. I introduced you as heroes, and I think by now it's probably obvious to many people, but I just want to make sure they understand that you're heroic. At least I think you're heroic, and I think many will agree. And then I want to come back. So I guess let me ask you the question, and then you can think about it while I continue to babble. But I wanted, being a heroic event, I wanted to see what you had to say about the what suggestions you can give to us to be better heroes ourselves. And they're heroes. You probably will deny that you're heroes, but you absolutely are. And not just because you suffered this, you were there and had this happen to you. That's not the reason why I think you're automatically a hero. But what you've done as a reaction to that has been nothing short of heroic. And what led you to be there and to join People's Temple, I think, is, in my opinion, is absolutely heroic. And you've talked so much about that, and I think that's probably obvious to everybody here what that movement was. It was, take Jim Jones out of it, it was thousands of heroes trying to make the world a better place. Sometimes you were trying to make it a better place for yourself, but your needs to go there in the first place. But you had the belief in the movement. It was a heroic thing that you were trying to do to make the world a better place. And you continue to do that since in your own very unique ways. Laura, you've been, there's so much of an activist. I've been friends with you on Facebook, and daily she's posting things about activism, and shows the picture to introduce her today. She was, protesting wherever it was, and so almost daily I see her, posting things about activism, and maybe you would like to give some suggestions about that. And then you were a teacher, you're a parent, and you're a good parent, you're a hero. And Vernon, you've been a police officer, and that's a heroic thing to do. And then you go and you talk to people, about this like you do, as painful and as difficult as it is, in a selfless effort to get us to understand something that we can't understand. You and I, we're not thinking, I know I can speak for many of us here, that we're not thinking we're going to join a group. You didn't think you were going to join a group that was a suicide group. And so that's always a thing that I think we listen or we hear, and we separate ourselves from that and don't think like, well, that's all, wow, interesting, but that's not going to happen to me. And I've been encouraging my students, I suppose this was a long question, and I've been encouraging my students to think about their own personal Jonestowns. I mean, you're not going to go off and join a group that's going to go down in a flaming way, like this. But what are your own personal Jonestowns? Your workplaces that you might wind up in that are a little bit too toxic. Like maybe not this level of toxicity, but relationships. Are you in any kind of relationships that are toxic? Some of them are obviously toxic. If you're in an abusive, psychologically or physically abusive relationship. But sometimes we get in relationships with. Sometimes I look back at friendships that I've had and thought, that was not a good friendship. No, nobody was abusing anybody, and I didn't get into too much trouble, but I didn't feel good from that relationship. It didn't do, it's just, sometimes it's hard to get out of a friendship because you just suddenly find yourself in one that's just, this is toxic, this isn't really good for me. So, anyway, now that I've babbled enough, and you maybe have a little time to think about what advice can you give us? You gave great advice about, watch out for these certain things. And none of us, I think, are thinking like, I'm not worried about that. What other advice can you give about being vigilant and being heroic and in your own unique ways? And so I'd like to hear what you both can share with us about being better everyday heroes.
If you're afraid, you're challenged in your life, and you're afraid, do it anyway. Meet the challenge. Because another one's going to come up. And each time you meet the challenge, you expand. If you're with a group of people and they're doing something wrong, or they're saying something that's not right, say something. Say something and see how it feels. If everyone else is doing something and you don't want to do it, don't do it.
I think that one of the things I do is I look for other heroes. Like I talk about Stephen Jones, he was a hero at 19. So I mean, I look for heroes, and you know, I work with ACLU, and there are 5 people right off the top who are absolutely amazing, steadfast, and committed. So they're my heroes. So I look for heroes, and then I try and bring them in my life. Like, because there aren't really that many heroes. So if I meet somebody who is absolutely awesome, I do try and figure out where that person is, and I want to spend time with people who are heroes. So, I mean, I do that with, and I'm a Quaker. Part of the reason I joined being a Quaker is that one of their commitments is for integrity, and I wanted my son around people with integrity. So, when he was younger, now he's 25 and a teacher, but when he was younger, I made sure he met Stephen every year at the anniversary, and I talked about Stephen. I made sure he met the Quakers and had conversations and friendships with them. I made sure that my impact in his life was to be absorbed into the breathing space of other heroes. Because I think that, in so many ways, I mean, I have so many people I respect, but that one over the top being a hero, you don't meet those people very often. And so when I meet them, I kind of glom onto them whenever I can. They don't decide things for me, but I just appreciate being around them. And there are people, I think I read the other day that people who have that quality of heroes, they're people who inspire other people. So I always look for people who are inspirational for me doing the right thing. And then I try to pass it on, play it forward, or pay it forward, or whatever it is. Like I try and follow them, and then I try and be somebody that people can follow. That way.
Can you suggest, I asked you this question at breakfast the other day, and you told me you had a good answer to that. I said, what could you share with people who aren't yet activists, how to become more activists?
What I noticed is when I was in college, I was part of the Student League for Human Rights at my campus. And, that was kind of an offshoot of SDS, Students for a Democratic Society, which is way before your time. But lately I've been working with the immigrants in San Diego, and a lot of the immigrants who go to schools in San Diego are homeless and live in their cars. And so they go to school every day, and they look like everybody else, and they have the same clothes as somebody else, and then everybody goes home to mom and dad or a shared housing or something, and they're actually homeless. And so I think that what students have to do is look for the people around you who are kind of shadow people. Like it might be people who are foster kids, who don't have parents kind of looking out for them, or who have moved into a system, or who, had a rough juvenile time and needs a friend or something. In elementary school, we always say, if somebody's alone, find a buddy. Or if we notice kids who are alone, we go up to another kid and say, you know what, Gerald's been sitting by himself for about 10 minutes. Could you just go over, hang out, see what's going on with him? So in elementary school, we take care of it as teachers. But when you're in college, there are people, I guarantee it, that there are people in this room or in your classes who have whole other system of problems. Can hardly pay the bill, can't pay for the food downstairs, have to run home, or whatever they do. And so in a way, what students should do is look for these shadow students in your environment who keep it really close to the chest and secret. They're not going to wear a flag saying, I'm going to sleep in my car tonight. But that's a way that you could just really get involved and try and help people, I think. Because they're here. I know they're here. And they're on the corner, and they're around this area. So you just have to see who needs taken care of that you could help.
Any questions? I want to say one more thing that's heroic about Vernon. I think this is heroic. Two things. I've heard you speak about how you had to and have forgiven Jim Jones to move on yourself. But you spoke tonight and other times today about Larry, the guy that shot you on the plane. And Vernon Vernon went and spoke on his behalf at his probation trial and did have him released. And he was instrumental in having him released. That's heroic. That's heroic. They shot 3 times by this gentleman and spoke to get him out.
And forgiveness, I mean, I was thinking, years ago, I was thinking about Jim Jones, and I'm going, this man is dead. The maggots have already eaten his body, and he's controlling my life because I hate it. So, the forgiveness is freedom. And Larry, he could have been me. He was deceived just as much as I was. Could very well have been me.
Have you seen Larry outside of after you got released?
I saw him once, and I was sharing with Laura. He seemed to be like a shell of a person. Like he was just not even there. And I wish him the best. I wish him healing. But he's never going to be my best friend. He's just a bit different. Yeah, I wish him healing. I do.
The forgiveness process that you went through, how was that? How bad was it? How good was it? Or how long did it take you? For both Larry and Jim?
It took me a long time. And I had to ask God for help. I prayed about it. They did a lot of work around it in therapy, but it took a long time.
One of the things Vern said to me today was really forgiving Jim was about forgiving ourselves. Because, Jim's not here to hear me swear at him or anything. And so, really, you can't do one and not the other. And so in a way, when you forgive Jim and say, you know what, it's over. Now you just have to rebuild. In a way, once you can say to Jim, you know what, it's over, your control over me is over, that's when you can forgive yourself too for being duped by this kind of, I think.
Yeah, hate can be the bond between people. I don't want that. I want to be free.
Well, I like to think that doing this helps that process for both of you. And I want to thank you for sharing all that with us tonight. Please come see them tomorrow at noon, and we'll do something different. We don't yet know for sure what that is.
Gonna dance on the table.
Okay.